Your phone is at 4%. No charger, no power. The grid failed and nobody knows when it is coming back. That phone is the most sophisticated survival tool ever built. Maps, communication, medical references, weather data, and you have 4% left. What would an engineer do with 4%? I will tell you. Because an engineer would keep that phone alive for 11 days. I spent 22 years building systems that cannot fail. Server infrastructure, disaster recovery pipelines, enterprise networks with redundant redundancies for the redundancies. And somewhere in year 18, I looked at my own life and realized I was living with single points of failure that would get me fired if I deployed them in a production environment. Your phone. You use it at 45% brightness. Background app refresh on for 19 apps you have not opened in 3 months. Location services running for 7 of those apps continuously. Push notifications pulling data every 60 seconds. Bluetooth scanning, Wi-Fi scanning. And the thing that kills me most, screen timeout set to 30 seconds, but you keep picking it up every 25 seconds, so it never actually times out. You are running a server with zero power management, maximum thermal output, and no failover plan. And when the grid goes down and that phone hits 4%, you will make panicked decisions instead of engineered ones. This is the audit. There are 2 completely separate problems here. Problem 1, how do you maximize what your phone can do before it dies? Problem 2, what do you do when it dies? Most people focus entirely on problem 1 and never seriously think about problem 2. Both matter. One has a better solution than most people have considered. Let me start with the battery math, because the numbers here are not intuitive. A modern smartphone battery holds between 3,000 and 5,000 milliamp hours of charge. Call it 4,000 as our working number. 4% of 4,000 milliamp hours is 160 milliamp hours. That is your starting capital. How long does 160 milliamp hours last? At full normal usage, roughly 45 minutes. At maximum power saving mode, with the screen off and no active processes, 3 to 4 hours. That is the baseline. Now here is the engineering insight that most people miss. Power consumption in a smartphone is not linear. The display is the single largest power consumer in the device, typically responsible for 30 to 40% of total battery drain. The cellular radio is the second largest, and its power consumption varies enormously based on signal quality. A phone searching for signal in a low coverage area draws 3 to 4 times more power from the cellular radio than a phone with full bars. These 2 variables alone dominate your power budget. Everything else is secondary. This means the first decisions you make at 4% determine how long you have. Reduce screen brightness to minimum. Turn it off entirely except when you need it. Enable airplane mode to kill the cellular radio completely. At that point, your 160 milliamp hours is running a processor that is mostly idle and a few background sensors. You have hours, not minutes, enough to do meaningful work. What does that work look like? Let me give you the exact sequence an engineer would run. First, extract critical information while you still have connectivity. Before you cut the cellular radio, do 3 things. Open your offline Maps app and confirm it has your region cached. Check your emergency contacts list and confirm the numbers are saved locally, not just in a cloud account that requires connectivity to access. And pull any critical medical information you need to have accessible offline. That sequence takes 4 minutes at most. Second, enable ultra-low power mode. Every major smartphone operating system has a battery saver mode that cuts clock speed, kills background refresh, reduces visual effects, and limits app activity. On iOS, it is called low power mode. On Android, the name varies by manufacturer, but the function is the same. This typically extends remaining battery life by 30 to 40% by itself. Enable it. Do not wait until 2%. Enable it at 20% before a crisis happens. This is a habit, not an emergency measure. Third, screen discipline. The screen is a power furnace. Every second the screen is on at full brightness is energy you are not spending on something useful. Set your auto lock to 30 seconds. Actually let it lock. Pick it up, check what you need, put it down, let it lock. This single habit change can double your effective battery life in low usage scenarios. Now let me verify a common claim. You will hear that turning off Wi-Fi extends battery life. Let me verify that. When Wi-Fi is connected to an active network, it actually uses less power than the cellular radio for data transmission because Wi-Fi operates at lower power over shorter range. The claim is only true when your phone is actively searching for Wi-Fi networks that are not there, which triggers continuous scanning. In a grid-down urban scenario with no active Wi-Fi networks nearby, yes, turning Wi-Fi off stops that scanning behavior and saves power. In a scenario where you have a local Wi-Fi network available from a battery-powered router or hotspot, use Wi-Fi instead of cellular. It is the more efficient radio. Let me talk about offline maps specifically, because this is where most people have the largest gap between what they think they have and what they actually have. Google Maps and Apple Maps download some tile data for local areas automatically, but that cache is limited, not guaranteed, and gets purged when your device needs storage space. If you open Google Maps offline in an emergency and you are more than 2 kilometers from your last cached area, you get a blank screen and an error message. This is failure mode number 1 in phone-based navigation. The engineered solution is a dedicated offline maps application with deliberately downloaded regions. Organic Maps is open source, free, based on OpenStreetMap data, and stores maps locally with no cloud dependency. Maps.me operates similarly. Osmand is the most feature-complete option, with turn-by-turn navigation fully functional offline. Any of these require you to deliberately download your region in advance. A major metropolitan area download is typically 1 to 3 gigabytes. A full country requires selective region downloads by state or province. Here is the thing about offline maps that most people do not consider. Street maps are useful. Topographic maps are essential if you are moving on foot outside of urban areas. A street map will show you that a road exists. A topo map will show you that the road climbs 300 meters over 2 kilometers, and you cannot drive a sedan across it. Osmand supports topographic overlay data. CalTopo and Gaia GPS are purpose-built for off-road navigation with proper topo data. Download these before you need them. Download your region specifically. Put them on your home screen. Test them in airplane mode. That test takes 90 seconds, and it will tell you immediately whether you actually have working offline maps or whether you have an icon that opens a blank screen. Failure mode number 2. Your Maps application requires a login to open. I have seen this. Some applications authenticate on launch and require an active connection to verify your subscription or account. If the network is down, they will not open. Test every critical application right now in airplane mode. Open it. Does it work? Does it load your offline data? If it requires a connection to authenticate before showing you your downloaded maps, it is not a reliable offline tool, regardless of what the marketing says. Failure mode number 3. Your critical data is in the cloud, not on the device. This is the architecture failure that underlies most modern applications. They store your data on servers and stream it to your device on demand. Notes apps, document apps, contact lists sync to cloud accounts, password managers with cloud-only storage, health records, medication lists. In a grid-up world, This is convenient. In a grid-down world, the data is unreachable. Every application you rely on for critical information needs to be audited for offline functionality. Open it in airplane mode. Does the data load? If the answer is no, the data is not yours in an emergency. The reference data problem deserves serious attention. Your phone can store and display enormous amounts of structured information without any network connectivity. The question is whether you have loaded that information deliberately. Medical references. If you are in a prolonged emergency and someone in your group needs care, what information do you have access to? The Merck manual is available in full offline versions. Wilderness medicine references from NOLS and similar organizations are available as PDFs. Drug interaction databases have offline versions. First aid protocols from the Red Cross are freely downloadable. None of this requires connectivity once loaded. All of it requires deliberate loading before you need it. The window to prepare this is right now, not when someone is injured and you are discovering that your medical app requires a cellular connection to display anything. Amateur radio frequencies and emergency protocols. In the United States, NOAA weather radio broadcasts on 7 frequencies in the VHF band. Local emergency services use specific frequencies documented publicly. If you have a handheld radio and the frequency list is on your phone, you can monitor and communicate effectively. If the frequency list is online and your connection is down, you are operating blind. Local maps of critical resources. Not the Google Maps version, which requires connectivity. A downloaded PDF or offline database of your area with locations of hospitals, pharmacies, fire stations, water access points, community emergency resources. This is the kind of data that takes 30 minutes to compile and save and is essentially useless to prepare after the fact. It requires local knowledge of your area. It requires you to have thought about it before the event. 30 minutes of preparation work that most people never do because the scenario feels hypothetical until it is not. There is one more category of phone capability that deserves its own section. The phone as a sensor platform. This is the IT framing that changes how you think about the device. Your phone contains an accelerometer, gyroscope, barometer, magnetometer, GPS receiver, microphone, and camera. These are not just hardware for apps, they are instruments. A barometric pressure sensor that is dropping rapidly indicates incoming weather change before it is visible. A magnetometer functions as a compass independent of any network. The GPS receiver in your phone works entirely independently of cellular networks. GPS is a receive-only system. Your phone receives timing signals from satellites and calculates its position locally. No data plan required, no tower required. Pure geometry and atomic clocks. This means your phone is a GPS navigator regardless of whether any human-built infrastructure is operating. The satellites will be there. The question is whether you have the software to use the data. A mapping application that functions offline with downloaded maps takes that GPS signal and converts it into navigation. An application that works only with tiles streaming from a server takes that same GPS signal and gives you a blue dot on a blank screen. The hardware is identical. The software architecture determines whether you have a tool or a paperweight. The barometer deserves specific attention. Rapid pressure drops, typically more than 4 hectopascals per hour, are a reliable short-term predictor of deteriorating weather. Your phone can tell you this. Most people have never opened a barometer app. The data is there, generated by a sensor that costs cents to manufacture and runs on microwatts of power. Install an application that reads the local sensor. Understand what the numbers mean. A phone that tells you a pressure drop is occurring lets you make a decision about shelter or travel timing that a phone running a weather app requiring internet cannot provide. The camera as a document scanner. Before a disruption, your critical documents should exist in two forms: physical originals in a waterproof container and digital scans stored locally on your phone. Passport, medical records, insurance documents, property documents, prescription lists, vaccine records. A phone with locally stored scans of these documents provides proof of identity, medical history, and property ownership in any scenario short of total device destruction. The scan takes 3 minutes per document. The preparation window is now. Now I want to address power completely, because the battery management section above is only relevant if you are managing a single charge. The deeper question is, how do you extend your power supply beyond the built-in battery? The first tier is a power bank. A quality power bank with 20,000 mAh and a modern phone battery of 4,000 mAh means 5 full charges. At managed power consumption in an emergency scenario, that translates to weeks of intermittent use, not days. The critical variables that most people do not test: power banks degrade with cycles, similar to phone batteries. A power bank you bought 3 years ago and have cycled 200 times may only deliver 60 or 70% of its rated capacity. Test it now. Charge it fully. Charge your phone fully. Connect them. Count how many full charges you actually get. Write that number down. That number, not the label, is your actual power budget. There is a secondary issue with power banks that most people do not think about. Power banks self-discharge. A fully charged power bank left in a drawer for 6 months may retain 70 to 80% of its charge. Left for a year, closer to 50%, depending on battery chemistry. The industry standard recommendation is to recharge power banks every 3 to 6 months during storage. Very few people actually do this. If your power bank is the emergency power supply for your phone and you have not touched it in 14 months, do not assume it is full. Check it. Recharge it quarterly. Write the recharge date on a piece of tape on the bank itself. This is a maintenance item, not a one-time purchase. The second tier is solar charging. A quality foldable solar panel of 20 to 40 watts can charge a power bank from a standard USB output in 4 to 8 hours of direct sun. The critical variables: wattage matters less than actual output under real conditions. A 40-watt panel on an overcast day delivers 6 to 8 watts. Panel angle relative to the sun matters enormously. A panel lying flat on a horizontal surface in winter at high latitude may deliver 15% of its rated output. I have tested this. In November, at latitude 52 degrees north, a 30-watt panel lying flat delivered 4 to 5 watts. Angled toward the sun at optimal angle, 19 to 22 watts. The difference between lying flat and properly angled is a factor of 4 in real conditions. This is not a marginal improvement. It is the difference between an unusable system and a functional one. The third tier is a hand crank generator. These are low-output devices. Most consumer hand crank generators produce 3 to 5 watts at realistic sustained human effort. Charging a 4,000 mAh phone battery from empty with a 5-watt generator takes roughly 3 hours of continuous cranking. This is not comfortable. It is, however, a real option when no other power source exists. The hand crank generator is not your primary option. It is your last resort before the phone is simply dead. Now we reach the point in the audit where I have to tell you something that contradicts the title of this video. When the battery dies and the power sources are exhausted, your phone is not a survival tool. It is a piece of glass and aluminum. And the communication function, the one function that most people consider primary during an emergency, is also the first function to fail in a large-scale infrastructure disruption. Because communication requires not just your phone, but towers, backhaul fiber, routing infrastructure, and power to all of it. Remove power from the grid, and within 8 to 12 hours, Most cell towers that lack backup generators have failed. Your phone at full charge cannot call anyone if there are no towers operating. This is the failure mode nobody talks about when they talk about phone preparedness. You are not preparing a tool. You are preparing one node in a network that requires the entire network to function for its primary purpose. And that network is fragile in ways that are well documented and largely unaddressed. Let me walk through 3 specific scenarios, because abstract advice about offline maps and power banks means nothing without understanding what you are actually preparing for. Scenario 1. 72-hour regional grid failure. Storm damage, transformer failure, localized infrastructure event. Cell towers with generator backup operate for the first 12 to 24 hours. After that, towers begin failing as generators run out of fuel and resupply trucks cannot reach them. Your phone with full battery and a 20,000 mAh power bank is a fully functional tool for days 1 and 2. You have maps, references, FM radio, and limited cellular communication early on. By day 3, cellular is unreliable or gone in most areas. Your FM radio keeps you informed. Your offline maps let you navigate. This is a winnable scenario with a prepared phone. Scenario 2. 2 to 4 week regional disruption. Major infrastructure event. Extended winter storm affecting large area. Cell infrastructure is intermittent at best after week 1. Your phone battery is a managed resource. Your solar panel provides daily charging if weather permits. Your power bank is your buffer for cloudy days. Your FM radio is your primary information source. Your Meshtastic network, if you have seeded it in your neighborhood, provides local text communication reliably throughout. This scenario exposes the gaps in people who have only prepared to the 72-hour standard. Scenario 3. Extended infrastructure disruption beyond 30 days. Every assumption about grid return is suspended. Your phone is now a computing device with locally stored data, not a communication device. Your Meshtastic network is your communication infrastructure. Your FM radio is your link to broader information. At this timescale, the social infrastructure layer, the relationships, the established protocols, the known meeting points, becomes the primary communication system. Technology provides leverage. Human networks provide continuity. The transition between these scenarios is not a clear line. Systems fail incrementally. Some cell coverage returns before others. Some towers have better generator supply. Some neighborhoods have more Meshtastic nodes and maintain communication while adjacent neighborhoods go silent. Design for the worst case. Benefit from anything better than the worst case. Now let me tell you what the infrastructure-independent alternatives look like. FM radio is the most underappreciated emergency communication tool in existence. It requires zero infrastructure on your receiving end. A battery-powered or hand-crank FM receiver picks up broadcasts from stations operating on emergency generator power with ranges of 50 to 150 kilometers depending on terrain. Many countries mandate that FM broadcasters maintain emergency generator capacity specifically for this scenario. You do not need cell towers. You do not need internet. You need a $20 radio with batteries. Many modern smartphones include an FM radio receiver chip. The hardware is physically present in most major Android devices produced in the last decade. The chip is almost always disabled in software because it competes with cellular data streaming services. In some regions, manufacturers have been required to enable it. In others, it requires a third-party application and may need headphones inserted as an antenna to function. The next radio application can enable the hardware FM receiver on compatible devices. Test this now. If your phone has a hardware FM chip and you can receive local FM stations without cellular connectivity, you have a broadcast receiver that costs nothing to operate and requires no infrastructure beyond the transmitter. Now I want to talk about Meshtastic, because this is the open-source solution that changes the communication picture in ways that most people have not encountered. Meshtastic is a project that enables text and GPS position communication over LoRa radio with no cellular infrastructure, no internet, no central server, and no subscription. LoRa stands for long range. It is a radio modulation protocol that achieves communication distances of 2 to 15 kilometers in open terrain, 1 to 5 kilometers in urban environments, by transmitting at very low power over a very narrow bandwidth. Battery consumption is dramatically lower than cellular or standard radio. A Meshtastic node on a small lithium battery can operate for days to weeks depending on message traffic. The way Meshtastic works in practice: a small hardware device, typically the size of a deck of cards, communicates with your smartphone over Bluetooth. When you send a text message on the Meshtastic app, your phone sends it to the hardware node over Bluetooth. The node transmits it over LoRa radio, and any other Meshtastic node within range picks it up and relays it. This creates a mesh network. Every node is both a receiver and a repeater. A message can hop through multiple nodes to reach someone several hops away, well beyond the range of any single node. The protocol handles routing automatically. You send a message. The network figures out how to deliver it. The practical range numbers: a single Meshtastic node to another node with no obstacles, 5 to 15 kilometers depending on antenna quality and terrain. In a suburban neighborhood, 2 to 4 kilometers per hop. With a network of nodes, say your neighborhood has 12 prepared households, each running a Meshtastic node on rooftops or upper windows, messages traverse the entire area reliably with no central infrastructure. A node goes offline, traffic routes around it. This is graceful degradation at the hardware layer. The hardware cost: a common Meshtastic compatible board, the Heltec LoRa 32 or the LilyGo T-Beam, costs between $25 and $50 depending on configuration. The software is free and open source. There are no subscriptions, no accounts, no corporate infrastructure. The radio frequencies used are in the unlicensed ISM band, in the US 915 MHz, requiring no license to operate at legal power levels. This is genuinely decentralized communication infrastructure that any technically literate person can deploy in an afternoon. What Meshtastic cannot do: it is low bandwidth. You can send text messages and GPS positions. You cannot send voice, video, or large files. Messages are limited to roughly 230 bytes per packet. This is not a general communications replacement. It is a text and position messaging system for situations where infrastructure is unavailable. What Meshtastic can do that nothing else can at this price point: it creates a persistent, infrastructure-independent communication network in your local area that costs $50 per node, requires no recurring costs, runs on a small battery for days, and cannot be shut down by any central authority because there is no central authority. Every node is the network. The network exists as long as the nodes exist. For a neighborhood resilience application, Meshtastic is the most practical solution I have found. A group of 12 to 20 households, each with a node and the app installed, has text communication that survives total cellular and internet infrastructure failure indefinitely, as long as the nodes have power. Let me address APRS briefly, because it serves a related function for anyone with an amateur radio license. Automatic Packet Reporting System is a digital radio protocol operating primarily on 144.390 MHz in North America that transmits GPS position, text messages, and status information over radio. It has been in operation since the 1980s and has redundant infrastructure, including satellite-linked repeaters. A PRS requires an amateur radio license in most jurisdictions for transmitting. It does not require a license to receive and monitor. A $25 software-defined radio dongle and a free application can turn any laptop into an APRS receiver, letting you see position reports from anyone transmitting in your area. The overlap between Meshtastic and APRS. Meshtastic is self-contained and requires no license. APRS has broader infrastructure and reaches farther, but requires a license for transmission. They solve slightly different problems. Meshtastic is neighborhood scale, no license text communication. APRS is regional scale position and short message communication with license transmission. They complement each other. Let me now give you the specific preloading checklist for your phone. These are the actions that turn a default smartphone into an actual offline survival tool. Each one takes between 10 and 60 minutes to complete. None of them require specialized knowledge. 1. Download Osmond or organic maps. Download your region. Download an adjacent region for travel contingency. Download topographic data for your region in Osmond. Test the application completely in airplane mode. Confirm you can navigate from your home to 3 predetermined locations offline. 2. Download and save offline a comprehensive medical reference, the Merck Manual in PDF format, a wilderness first aid guide, a basic drug reference with common medication interactions. Save these as files in a folder on local device storage, not in a cloud document app. Open them in airplane mode to confirm they are accessible. 3. Compile a local emergency resource document. This is a text file or PDF you create yourself containing addresses of the 3 nearest hospitals, the frequency of your nearest NOAA weather radio station, your local emergency management agency contact information, the addresses of 3 community meeting points you have designated with your household. Save this locally. It does not need to be beautiful. It needs to be there and readable offline. 4. Export your contact list to a local file, not just synced to the cloud. An actual exported VCF file stored in local device storage in your Downloads folder. If your phone is reset or your cloud account is inaccessible, your contacts exist locally. This takes 90 seconds. 5. Check your phone for hardware FM radio capability. Install Next Radio or equivalent. Test FM reception in airplane mode with headphones connected. If it works, you have a zero-cost broadcast receiver that requires no cellular infrastructure. 6. If you are in a region where Meshtastic adoption exists, or you are willing to seed it in your area, acquire a compatible device and configure the network. The setup time from unboxing to operational is approximately 2 hours for someone comfortable with mobile applications. The community documentation at meshtastic.org is thorough and well maintained. The system map now looks like this. 9 layers in the audit. This episode was within layer 6, communication. But communication is not a single system. It is a stack itself. At the top of that stack is your phone, the multi-tool with the 4% problem. Below it are the backup radio systems that survive the phone death. Below those are the mesh networks that survive infrastructure failure. At the bottom is the most resilient communication tool ever built. Face-to-face contact with people who are physically in your location, who you have relationships with, and who have agreed in advance on meeting protocols. Every layer above that bottom layer is a convenience layer, a layer that makes communication faster and longer range. But the bottom layer does not require batteries, bandwidth, or infrastructure. It requires preparation of a different kind. It requires you to know your neighbors, to have had the conversation before the event, to have established the protocols while they were theoretical rather than urgent. This is a different kind of preparedness than buying hardware. It is social infrastructure, and it is the one thing this community consistently underfunds relative to its actual importance. Your phone, fully prepared with offline data and power managed with discipline, is a powerful tool for the early hours and days of an infrastructure disruption. Your Meshtastic node, properly configured with a local network, extends that communication capability for weeks without infrastructure. Your FM radio extends your information intake indefinitely, and your pre-established relationships with nearby people extend your communication capability permanently, with zero hardware cost and zero power requirement. Communication, Layer 6, audited. But there is a problem with everything you have just built that is invisible until the moment it becomes catastrophic. If people know what you have prepared, where it is, and that you are the household that can sustain itself while others cannot, you have created a different kind of vulnerability. Your preparation is a resource. Resources attract attention. In normal conditions, being known as the prepared household is socially comfortable. In a prolonged disruption where scarcity is real and desperation is present, that same visibility is a liability of a very different kind. Information security in a preparedness context is not a technical problem. It is a human problem. And it is the one layer in this entire series where the solution is not hardware, not software, not a protocol, but behavior. How you talk about what you have, who knows what the outside of your home signals to people walking by. This is Layer 7, and it is the one nobody in this community wants to talk about honestly. That is exactly why we are going there next.